Us as blacks, we need to ban this Jeffrey Dahmer movie. This is some sick shit. What he did to our race. This is some sick shit. We need to boycott this damn movie off Netflix. This is sick. This is sick. The victim family should be getting paid off every dollar Netflix made. This is fucking sick. We need to ban this Jeffrey Dahmer movie. This is some sick shit. It's sick.
Damn it, man. Lil Boosie's pissed off, ain't he? He wants everybody to boycott Netflix. Don't watch it. Look what he's done to our people. Nobody should support this dude, man. This dude's like the absolute worst of the worst. American psycho, right? But let me tell you something. People are going to tune in, man. People want to see this stuff. You know, I remember hearing about that Jeffrey Dahmer story back in the day when I was a kid and, you know, scary, right? You didn't know all the details. Now you get the Netflix, you know, docuseries, and people are into this stuff, man. I don't mean into the stuff that old Jeff was into, but there are people out there that are into that shit, man. You might remember the dude that we interviewed that was Arthur Shawcross's good friend. Talked about he had feelings like old Jeff has got and like Arthur had. Arthur Shawcross, serial killer in Rochester, New York. But anyway, man, Jeffrey Dahmer, just want to tell you, Lil Boosie, one of the first people that he grabbed was the kid Steve. Remember the kid was out jogging and old Jeff takes him home and he leans in for the kiss and dude's like, dude, what's up, dude? I thought you were going to give me a ride to the concert, bro. You got me over here, you're working out. I'm just trying to get to that concert, bro. And Jeff's like, oh, you're going to go to the concert. I'm going to take you out back, too. I mean, Jeff's definitely a deranged dude, right? And people are talking about the Netflix series, talking about, hey, you know, parents, you know, shouldn't treat their kids or yell and fight in front of their kids because this is what happens and, you know, all this and that. But at the end of the day, when you watch that Netflix series, really, man, should the dad have been out like picking up roadkill with this dude and dissecting it? I tell you, man, I got 2 kids, man. If my son came home talking about, hey, Dad, I want to cut open this raccoon I just found down the street. I'm like, hell no, dude. Like, what the fizzle is going on with you, my boy? Definitely not. Definitely not doing that. I mean, did the kid have a crazy upbringing? I mean, hey, it was typical back then. Parents are arguing, parents are fighting, they're separating, they're getting a divorce. But is that the reason why old Jeffrey Dahmer did the shit he did? I don't know, maybe you got some like educated people who say, yeah, that's exactly why. But I'm over here like, nah, hell no. This dude's wires were crossed, man. Something was up with that dude. And, you know, we're going to talk about these type of people. We're going to talk about prison. We're going to talk about Jeffrey Dahmer and, you know, how he dies in prison and how if you end up in the wrong place for the type of stuff that you've done, someone's going to do something dirty to you, right? And eventually, old Jeffrey Dahmer gets the, you know what he got. But let's talk about Jeff, man, and then we'll get back to my opinions and, you know, people in federal prison, people in state prison. And a lot of times, dudes that been in prison can tell you this. Them dudes almost always fit the same profile, man. Glasses, kind of goofy. Yeah, we know what you're here for, buddy. Don't try to lie and say you stole money from a bank or you're a bank robber or a drug dealer. We know what you're here for. And matter of fact, if you're in a USP, in a maximum security prison, they definitely got something for you, man. 17 and a half years in prison. I've seen some vicious things done to people that were arrested for vicious things. SOs, offenders like this cat. But let's get into Jeffrey Dahmer's story.
The grisly discovery of pieces of as many as 15 bodies, including 3 human heads, kept in a refrigerator, has shocked residents and police in Milwaukee. The severed remains were found in the fly-infested apartment of a candy factory worker early Tuesday after a man who said he escaped from the flat flagged down police. You think you've seen it all out here, and then something like this happens, said Officer Ralph Mueller at the time. The gruesome scene at the apartment house in a rundown neighborhood near Marquette University greeted patrolmen who were hailed by the man who had handcuffs dangling from one wrist. The man said he was able to flee from the apartment after being threatened with a knife. Police found the walls of the apartment plastered with photographs of nude, mutilated bodies. A dresser was brimming with drawings and snapshots, body parts stuffed in cardboard boxes and plastic bags. A barrel was filled with acid and bones. A video camera was mounted on a wall. Police said most of the body parts are believed to be from males of various races. Officers at the scene said the stench was overpowering. "I thought it smelled like dead bodies," said a neighbor, Anita Lusk. "Never thought I'd be right." Other neighbors told police they heard sawing in the apartment at all hours. Milwaukee Police Lieutenant Thomas Breitlow said Tuesday that police had arrested 31-year-old Jeffrey Dahmer at the apartment and booked him on suspicion of homicide. "He was just a quiet guy who kept to himself. He was kind of dirty, and he walked through the alleys at all hours of the night," said Pamela Bass, who lived across the hall. "I thought he was a little strange, but this goes beyond strange." Originally from Medina, Ohio, Dahmer worked at Ambrosio Chocolate, a downtown Milwaukee factory, for about 6 years. He was convicted and served a year in jail in 1988 after offering a 13-year-old boy $50 to pose nude for photos. Dahmer, still on probation, also was cited in 1982 for indecent exposure at the Wisconsin State Fair. James Fox, at the time a Northern University criminologist and an authority on serial killers, said the crime is atypical of most serial killers, who are usually careful about covering up evidence of killings and controlled in how they kill. But Fox said it does fit the stereotype. He cited the case of Ed Gein, who terrorized rural Wisconsin more than 31 years ago. He killed 15 of his female farmer neighbors, dismembered them, and used their body parts to make chair seats, lampshades, and bracelets. Gein's crimes were the basis for the movies Psycho and Silence of the Lambs. We've all seen them. The stereotypical Hollywood image of a serial killer, Fox said. This type of person tends to be a little more confused, reclusive, a loner, said Fox, who co-wrote Mass Murder, America's Growing Menace. His whole fantasy is wrapped up in death and destruction, as opposed to the cold, calculating Bundy type of killer. There were signs, many signs, but most indications that something might be amiss with Jeffrey Dahmer were ignored. Neighbors heard the power saws buzzing at all hours. A putrid smell permeated the 30-unit apartment building for over a year. No one challenged Dahmer's explanation of rotting meat in his freezer that he said was broken. "We've been smelling odors for weeks, but we thought it was a dead animal. We had no idea it was humans," said neighbor Ella Vickers. Police did not receive one complaint about Dahmer in the 2 years he lived at the Oxford Apartments. But as his son sought parole in 1989 for sexual assault, Lionel Dahmer begged a judge to order treatment. "This may be our last chance to institute something lasting," he said. Although probation officers are required by law to make monthly home visits, his agent was overloaded back then, and Dahmer lived in a high-crime area. So what did the probation department do? They waived it. They never checked on him. Dahmer was a bright but average student. A counselor told his parents Dahmer seemed uninterested in schoolwork. High school pranks escalated to a drunk and disorderly arrest in 1989. And as you've seen on the Netflix series, Dahmer had moved away from home after his father got pissed. He dropped out of Ohio State University and then joined the military. He was booted out of the army because of alcoholism. His stepmother, Sherry Dahmer, told the Cleveland Plain Dealer. He was a gentle person, but when he got drunk, it would take 4 policemen to hold him down. He was fired from the Ambrosio Chocolate Factory, but the company, at the time of his arrest, refused to talk about him. After serving 10 months in jail for the 1988 arrest in 1989, Dahmer lured a man home and put a sleeping pill in his coffee. But the man woke and ran, Sherry Dahmer said. Since then, we have been on edge. Obviously, he has taken a turn for the worst. At the time of his arrest, he was a suspect in 17 murders, which will all come to be true. He was arrested after police found body parts of 11 different people in that apartment. He was charged with 4 counts of murder. His bail was $1 million. When Dahmer first walked into court, he was stoic and unshaven. He said nothing other than that he understood the charges against him. More charges were expected in early August as police identified other victims. Court papers also provided gory details of the crime scene, many of which you've seen if you'd watched the Netflix series. They charged Dahmer had sexual contact with at least 3 of the victims and cut out the heart of one to eat later. They found all kinds of chemicals, things that as a young boy he learned to use when he found the roadkill. Police also said they found in Dahmer's apartment a photograph of the 14-year-old boy who was the missing brother of a youth Dahmer had previously molested. That was the one he served the 10 months in jail for. Medical examiner Jeffrey Jensen said the remains were not inconsistent with cannibalism. We may have opinions on that at a future time. Officials did not elaborate, nor would police say where else they might look. Police departments in Akron, Columbus, Ohio, Miami, and Chicago confirm they are checking files. Dahmer grew up in a small town 50 miles from Akron, attended college in Columbus, and lived briefly in Miami before moving to Milwaukee in 1982. He also spent time in Chicago. Police were looking in West Allis, Wisconsin after Dahmer's family said bones and a slimy substance were found in a vat in the basement of Dahmer's grandmother's house in 1988. Dahmer had moved in with his grandmother, Catherine Dahmer, 87, in 1982. The woman complained to relatives of a chemical odor in the basement, the Cleveland Plain Dealer reported. Jeffery said it was an animal. His stepmother, Sherry, said when he was young, he liked to use acid to scrape the meat off dead animals. He told Lionel, his father, that's what he was doing in the basement. It wasn't long before Jeffery sat down with the police. He confessed to 3 more killings, bringing the grisly count in the body part murders to 15. He told police he killed 2 men at his grandmother's suburban home between 1985 and 88. He also admitted to killing a 3rd man who, according to relatives, disappeared in the summer after going to a gay pride parade in Chicago. The former chocolate factory worker on parole for child molesting was suspected in the 17 deaths since 1978. He was a dangerous man, a man bent on murder. He had urges that were uncontrollable. Eventually, he would be sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms in prison. And at the time, he told a hush court, he hopes that God had forgiven him, because I know society never will. At his sentencing, Dahmer sat stone-faced as families of victims vented their rage. Rita Isabel, sister of Errol Lindsay, who was killed by this American psycho, was overcome with grief during her statement and lunged hysterically at Dahmer, hurling obscenities before being restrained by bailiffs. "I hate you," she screamed. "Your name is Satan." Dahmer's only sign of emotion, a deep breath he took before reading the statement he spent 4.5 hours crafting in jail. "I deserve whatever I get because of what I have done," Dahmer said. "I didn't ever want freedom. Frankly, I wanted death." Dahmer said he has turned to God since his arrest. "I should have stayed with God," he said. "I tried and I failed and created a Holocaust." He did not remember all the names of his victims. He only knew he ended all of their lives. After being sentenced for 15 murders, Dahmer would later plead guilty on May 1st, 1992, to aggravated murder and the beating, death, and dismemberment of 18-year-old Stephen Hicks in Ohio. Asked his plea, Dahmer, 31 at the time, responded simply, "Guilty as charged, Your Honor." Officers John Balzarak, Joseph Garberish, and Assisting Officer Rick Perbacon were eventually suspended July 26, 1991, after returning one of Dahmer's eventual victims back to his apartment on May 27, 1991. You have to wonder how the hell these cops let that fly. Did they not care? Were they lazy or plain stupid? Balzarak and Garberish were fired and then reinstated by a judge in 1994 and remained in law enforcement. You have to wonder how these guys could ever get their jobs back, right? Eventually, Dahmer would meet his fate. Live by the sword, die by the sword. Jeffrey Dahmer's bloody death in a prison bathroom on November 28, 1994, at Columbia Correctional Institute was a dramatic, some say, a fitting end to the life of a killer and a cannibal. "I was so happy to hear he was dead," says Janie Hagan, sister of Richard Guerrero, one of at least 16 young men murdered by Dahmer. "I was so excited that finally the monster was gone. He was just plain evil. That may sound harsh, but when you lose a brother..." Dahmer, 34, would find his end while he was cleaning a toilet next to a basketball court. When out of the sight of prison guards, he was beaten to death. Christopher Scarver, like Dahmer, was and is a convicted first-degree murderer from Milwaukee. "I dreamed of this day, and then it actually happened," says Carolyn Smith, sister of victim Edward Smith. "My whole body started shaking. Right now I'm very pleased, but I'm Catholic. I don't believe in capital punishment, but some days the evil side comes out of me." Christopher Scarver, the man who killed Jeffrey Dahmer, was also born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. After he dropped out of high school and his mother kicked him out of the house, Scarver secured a position through the Youth Conservation Corps program as a trainee carpenter. A program supervisor allegedly told Scarver that once he completed the program, he would become a full-time employee, but that never happened. He was pissed off, and on the first day of June in 1990, a disgruntled Scarver went to the office of the training program. Steve Lohman, a former boss, was working there. Scarver said that the program owed him money and demanded Lohman give it to him. When Lohman only gave him $15 measly, Scarver shot him in the head, killing him instantly. The man who killed Jeffrey Dahmer was arrested a few hours later, sitting on the stoop of his girlfriend's apartment building. During Scarver's trial, a police officer testified that Scarver had told the arresting officers he planned to turn himself in because he knew what he did was wrong. In 1992, Christopher Scarver was convicted and sentenced to life behind bars. Nothing to lose. Jeffrey Dahmer was never destined to have an easy time in prison, right? That's what we're all taught. In retrospect, some would argue that Jeffrey Dahmer's death was a certainty from the moment he entered prison. Then, too, there was the fact that he was gay and did the big R on his young male victims, a crime that carried a particular stigma in the culture of the world behind bars. The people who commit the R are always the people that are banished. In short, the judge had spared Dahmer from death row. The state of Wisconsin at the time prohibited capital punishment. A prison term of any length was really a death sentence for the Milwaukee cannibal. The only remaining question was when. At first, Scarver didn't pay much attention to the cannibal. Dahmer's first year in the Columbia Correctional Institution had been a quiet one. He checked into what we commonly refer to as protective custody. He was kept, with his consent, in solitary confinement, minimizing the impact of his presence on the other inmates for his own protection. After all the violence he had committed, now he was scared. Now he really didn't want to die, did he? So he hid in solitary confinement. But after a year of isolation, and I can tell you from personal experience, it begins to weigh on your mind, on your brain. You become depressed. You don't want to be isolated. You want to talk to somebody. He reportedly told family members that he didn't care what happened to him, that he finally had enough of solitary confinement, that he had become a born-again Christian, and that Jesus Christ had forgiven all of his sins during his incarceration. He was prepared to repent and meet his maker if someone decided to kill him. So Dahmer would leave solitary and join prison life. But according to Scarver, the man who killed Jeffrey Dahmer, eventually, he wasn't repentant at all, he said. Scarver claimed that Dahmer would use prison food and ketchup to replicate bloody severed limbs as a means of taunting the other prisoners. Perhaps he was looking for death. Christopher Scarver also said that he witnessed a few heated interactions between Dahmer and other prisoners, a claim that was borne out when another prisoner, Osvaldo Durfee, attempted to take Dahmer's life as well when he slashed at his neck with a razor in front of guards. Dahmer wasn't seriously hurt, though, and he continued to participate in regular prison activities until November 28, 1994, when the guards were nowhere to be found. Scarver took a 20-inch metal bar off a piece of exercise equipment. He cornered Dahmer by a locker room and pulled out a newspaper clipping that he had been keeping in his pocket, confronting the notorious cannibal with a detailed account of his crimes. Thus began the confrontation that ended with Jeffrey Dahmer's death. I asked him if he did those things because I was fiercely disgusted. With no guards around, 25-year-old Christopher Scarver struck Dahmer over the head twice with the metal bar and smashed his head against the wall. Now he had become the prey. He was the victim. He then bludgeoned another killer to death, Jesse Anderson. Scarver was bent on murder on that morning. On April 21st, 1992, Jesse Anderson and his wife went to a movie and a dinner at TGI Fridays, outside the Northridge Mall in northwest Milwaukee. After dinner, Jesse had stabbed Barbara, his wife, 5 times in the face and head, and then he stabbed himself 4 times in the chest, though most of his wounds were superficial. Barbara went into a coma and died from her wounds 2 days later. Anderson would call the police and blame 2 black men for attacking him and his wife. He presented police with a Los Angeles Clippers basketball cap he claimed to have knocked off the head of one of the assailants. Perhaps this is what pissed Scarver off. Perhaps it was the fact that Anderson had blamed 2 black men. While Anderson had left his blood on the razor wire, Dahmer was found still alive with extreme head and facial injuries. He was taken to the hospital where he was then pronounced dead. The cause of Jeffrey Dahmer's death was blunt force trauma that had been delivered in brutal fashion by Scarver. Some people who are in prisons are repentant, Scarver said in the wake of Jeffrey Dahmer's death, but he was not one of them. From the murder of Jeffrey Dahmer, Christopher Scarver received 2 additional life sentences. He was transferred to several different prisons after the attack, and now he is believed to be housed in the Centennial Correctional Facility in Canaan City, Colorado. Jeffrey Dahmer, American Psycho. there are people like him lurking in every neighborhood. Trust me. Jeffrey Dahmer, American Psycho. Do you believe that there's people like that still in the world? For some reason, I do. Remember, I interviewed that kid that was Arthur Shawcross's friend. Dude was like, man, sometimes I have these urges. I haven't acted on them yet, though, Chad. But I do think there's a lot of weird people out there. You know, I understand people like, man, protest this Netflix thing. You know, and sometimes some of these crazy motherfuckers, yeah, they might get that urge, man, and be like, ah. You got to be careful, man. The world is a dangerous place. You know, you got people like Arthur Shawcross, the serial killer from where I'm from, was brutalizing all those prostitutes. You know, you got the guy that I just talked about, that was his buddy. You got some dude that just did something vicious to a 65-year-old prostitute in my old neighborhood. Things I can't speak about on YouTube that are just outrageous. There are some nutcases, man. People that go in there and do all these crazy things, and like the dude at the Tops Market in Buffalo. There's some crazy, deranged people out there, man. But you know, people like Jeffrey Dahmer, when you get to prison, you got to at least think in your head like he thought. He knew it was coming eventually. Like, yo, dude, you're like the worst of the worst, homie. Like, you're victimizing people. And eventually someone was going to get at him. You know, Scarver says, hey, you know, I was being taunted with the food or whatever. But why do you think he really did what he did? Why do you think he ended both of them dudes' lives that day? Was he just like, man, I don't like neither one of these dudes. This dude was, you know, killing, you know, kind of like what Lil Boosie was saying, right? He victimized my people. I'm here for life anyway. I got nothing to lose. I'm about to put this dude's lights out. And you know what? This other cat, I know who he is too. He tried to blame some black folks for some bullshit that he did. So you know what? I might as well kill two birds with one stone. I'm already here for the rest of my life. I'm taking both of these cats out. I ain't never getting out of jail. Came into prison at 25 years old. These are some of the people that you might be around. You might be in prison for some BS, right? For some shit that's, you know, frowned upon. And then you run into a dude like Scarver who has nothing to lose. He's like, you know what? I'm putting your lights out. You know, you see some wild things. And I've seen plenty of dudes in prison where in the penitentiary, they came in there and they tried their hand, man. We talked about Donnie LaFon. You guys heard about him on Killer Chronicles. Man, Donnie was a wild dude, man. Had a dude come in there, chief of police. I think he was also a SO. Donnie kicked his head in, man. They put him on a helicopter, mercy flighted him up out of there. He lived. But man, when you walk into prison with a crime like that, you go to the wrong place, you get caught in the wrong area, blind spots. You've seen what happened to Whitey Bulger. They get you in a blind spot, man, no one cares about you. They're about to let, you know, sometimes the cops will let people put work in on you. They're not always there to save you. You think that out here in the street, you know, the cops are here. If you call them, you're a law-abiding citizen, they're going to respond. In jail, who are you? To them, you're just another dirtball. Especially if you're in there for the stuff like OJD there, right? American Psycho, man. Blood on the Razor Wire TV. If you're doing bad shit, man, you probably should stop because you might leave your blood on the razor wire. With respect, Blood on the Razor Wire TV. Until tomorrow, we're out.